Hey there. Forget the bedtime fairy tales you were handed when you were little. The clean heroes, the shining armor, the polite endings. The truth, the old truth, is darker than that. Softer, too, in a strange way, like ash that still holds heat. Tonight, I'm going to walk with you into the story of Achilles, not the greatest warrior poster version, but the boy who was promised glory the way a knife is promised to a throat. And before we sink our voices low, let me tease you with 3 things you will hear in this darkness. A friend's body lying cold in sand, while a furious man refuses to let him be buried. A prince dragged behind a chariot until the earth forgets his face. A God-guided arrow, so small and ordinary, finding the one unprotected place on an almost unbreakable life. If you find a kind of peace in this shadow, if the quiet of old tragedies helps your mind finally unclench, leave a like or subscribe, the way you might leave a small coin on a grave. Not to bargain with anything, just to say, I was here, I listened. Now, let the room grow dim. Turn the screen down. Let the light soften. If you can, let your shoulders fall away from your ears. Let your jaw loosen like a knot, finally giving up. Take a slow breath in, one you don't have to earn, and let it out as if you're blowing dust off an old book. Good. I'm sitting beside the fire as I tell this. I always imagine that, even when I'm not. The flames make that quiet little sound, like paper being carefully crumpled. The candle beside me trembles, and every time it does, the shadows on the wall move. Not fast, never fast, just enough to make the room feel alive, like it's listening too. Achilles begins before Achilles knows he is Achilles. It begins with water, not the friendly water of a bath, not the water that kisses your hands when you wash them before sleep. This is myth water, river water that remembers the dead, sea water that can swallow an army and still look calm the next morning. When people in those old stories spoke of water, they spoke the way we speak of fate, something you can drink and drown in at the same time. His mother, Thetis, came from that water. You can picture her however you like, goddess, nymph, shadow, and foam, but I always feel something more personal when I imagine her. A woman who loves too fiercely, a woman who knows, from the start, that love is not enough to outmuscle what is written. There are prophecies in the Achilles story, the way there are stones in a riverbed every step. You feel them underfoot. One prophecy said this: if Thetis bore a son, that son would be greater than his father. Greatness, in the language of gods, is a dangerous word. It doesn't mean happiness. It doesn't mean safety. It means a name that will not die and a body that likely will. Zeus wanted Thetis. Poseidon wanted her too. Imagine that 2 powers of the world staring at a woman like she's a prize, and then imagine the moment they both pull back, not out of kindness, but out of fear. If she birthed a son by one of them, that son might one day rise like a blade against his own maker. So they did something that always chills me when I think about it. They married her off, not to a god, but to a mortal. Peleus, a king, a good enough man by human standards, sturdy and warm-blooded and doomed to age. A compromise, the safety measure. You know that feeling, don't you? When someone solves a problem by shoving it onto a smaller life. When the powerful keep their hands clean by making someone else carry the weight. The wedding was famous, loud, golden, the kind of gathering where the tables sag with fruit and roasted meat, where the air smells of wine and sweat and crushed herbs under dancing feet. All the gods were invited, almost all, and in that almost was the seed of another war, another curse. But Achilles is not born from the party. He is born from what comes after, when the music has died and the torches are stubs. When Thetis lies awake beside a mortal man and listens to his breathing, heavy and human, and feels the future pressing its cold mouth against the back of her neck. Some mothers sing to their babies before they are born. I think Thetis did something else. I think she planned. There are different versions of what she tried to do for her child, and the truth is probably braided from all of them. Myths are like that many hands on the same rope. One version says she took her newborn son and held him over a fire, burning away the parts of him that could die. Each night, a ritual. Each night, the smell of smoke curling into a room that should have smelled only of milk and linen. Can you imagine it? A mother, in the dark, holding her baby above flames, her face lit from below. Not monstrous, not cruel, desperate. The kind of desperation that makes people do things they would condemn in anyone else. Another version says she carried him to the river Styx. That one always sits in my mind like a cold coin. The river Styx isn't just water. It's a boundary. It's the place oaths are sworn so tightly that even gods fear to break them. It is black, not because of mud, but because it runs through the underworld's memory. It tastes, I imagine, like iron and old sorrow. Thetis, in that telling, gripped her infant by the heel and dipped him into the river. Just that, a small act, a simple motion, the kind of motion you might do when you test bathwater with your wrist. But here, the water is death's mirror, and the baby's skin drinks it like a spell. His body became hard to harm. Not invincible, not truly. Nothing is, but close enough that men would later speak of him as if he were made of bronze beneath the flesh. And yet, in every spell, there is a seam. She held him by the heel. She had to hold him somewhere. Her fingers pressed into that soft place, that tiny curve of bone and tendon. The water could not touch what her hand covered. I always pause there, because it's so heartbreakingly human. You can be a goddess. You can know the hidden roads of the sea. You can bargain with fate until your voice goes raw still. Your hand will be in the way. Still, your love will leave one small part unguarded. That heel would become a story within the story, a symbol people still use when they want to say, there is always one weakness. But in the beginning, it was just a baby's heel. Warm, pink, alive. Peleus, depending on the version, caught Thetis in the act. He saw the fire, or the river-damp child, or the strange glitter in his son's skin, and he panicked, the way mortals do when they glimpse divine methods. He shouted, he grabbed, he interrupted. Sometimes the interruption is the true curse. Thetis, furious and hurt and frightened, fled back to the sea. The marriage had been a leash, and she snapped it. She left the child behind. And so Achilles grows up between worlds, born of water, raised on land, loved by a mother who is absent, guarded by a father who does not fully understand what he has been handed. As a boy, he is sent to Chiron. Chiron the centaur, half man, half horse, teacher of heroes. There is something tender in that image. The wild creature in the mountains taking in children who will later stain the earth with blood. If you've ever held something fragile and thought, absurdly, I can keep this safe, then you understand Chiron's task. The mountain air around Chiron's cave would have been sharp, clean, pine resin, crushed needles underfoot, wet stone. In the mornings, mist would sit in the hollows like sleeping animals. In the evenings, the sky would turn the color of bruised peaches, and the first stars would look like pinholes in a dark cloth. Achilles learned to run there, not the theatrical running of a champion in a stadium. Real running, bare feet, slapping cold ground, lungs burning. The taste of metal in the back of the throat. He learned how silence sounds when you are alone in trees. He learned how to listen for danger, not with thought, but with skin. Chiron taught him medicine too. That detail always stuns me. The same hands that would later drive a spear into a man's belly learned first how to crush herbs into paste, how to stitch torn flesh, how to set a bone so it heals straight. Isn't that a kind of dark joke the myths play? To make the greatest killer also capable of healing. When Achilles was tired, truly tired, when his muscles trembled with the sweet ache of training, he would lie on a flat rock outside the cave and stare upward. Imagine the rock, warm from the day's sun, but cooling quickly as evening arrives. Imagine the way his breath would make a small fog in the air. Imagine him listening to his own heartbeat and feeling, for the first time, that he had one, a heart, a thing that can stop. Chiron would sometimes tell stories, old stories, warnings disguised as entertainment. Heroes who chose glory and lost everything. Heroes who tried to avoid fate and walked into it anyway. Achilles listened, half bored, half hungry. At that age, you always think you'll be the exception. And in the distance, beyond the mountains, beyond the clean air and the pine and the careful lessons, the world was already sharpening. There was a city by the sea, Troy, its walls high and pale, its towers like teeth against the sky. And there were kings and princes and bargains and insults gathering like storm clouds. You can almost hear it, if you listen close, the low murmur of an approaching war, like thunder far away. So far, you could pretend it's not coming. Achilles is still a boy when the first threads of that war tighten. A mortal prince named Paris visits Sparta. He is beautiful in a way that causes trouble. He is welcomed. He is fed. He is given wine that tastes of honey and smoke. He sees Helen, whose face is described like a light, like a promise, like a curse, and he takes her. Some say she went willingly. Some say she didn't. Myths don't always care about consent the way we do. That's one of their uglinesses. But what matters, in the machinery of history and legend, is that men use her as a reason, an excuse. The Greek kings call each other. Oaths are remembered. Pride rises like bile. Ships begin to be built, their ribs curved like the bones of giant fish, their hulls tarred and smelling of pine, pitch, and salt. And somewhere on a quiet mountain, Achilles keeps training. He doesn't know his name is already being spoken in councils. He doesn't know there are men counting on his rage the way farmers count on rain. He doesn't know that his mother, down in the sea, is listening to the same rumors and feeling her stomach twist with dread, because Thetis knows the second prophecy. It's simple, cruel, like the snap of a twig. If Achilles goes to Troy, he will win glory, and he will die young. If he stays home, he will live long and be forgotten. Imagine being a teenager and hearing that. Imagine being told, you can be loved by the world briefly, or you can be warm and ordinary for a long time. Most of us never get offered that choice so plainly. We make it anyway, in smaller ways, every day. We trade peace for applause. We trade quiet for attention. We trade health for work. We trade years for moments. Thetis tries to cheat it. She hides him on an island, Skyros, dressed as a girl among the daughters of King Lycomedes. The image is almost gentle. Achilles with hair unbound, soft fabric on his skin, pretending to be someone else while the sea wind blows outside. But even there, fate has a sense of smell. Odysseus comes. Odysseus, clever as a knife. He lays out gifts for the girls, beads, ribbons, fine cloth, and among them, a shield and a spear. When a sudden alarm is raised, some say a trumpet, some say a shout. Only one of the girls reaches instinctively for the weapons. Achilles. It's such a small moment, and it ends his hiding. He is revealed. He is claimed. He is pulled toward Troy like iron toward a magnet. And here, beside the fire, I want you to feel how quietly that pull happens. No lightning, no dramatic music, just men talking, promises being made, a ship waiting with its ropes creaking, the smell of wet wood, the taste of salt on lips, the heaviness in a mother's chest when she knows she has lost. Thetis meets him before he leaves. I imagine the shoreline at dusk, the sea darkening, the horizon bruised purple, Achilles standing with sand sticking to his ankles. Thetis rising from the water, not splashing, not flashy, just appearing, as if the sea simply decided to become a woman for a moment. She tells him the truth. She tells him the choice. And Achilles, young, bright with strength, full of that dangerous belief that glory is the same as meaning, chooses the short, shining path. I don't blame him. Honestly, I don't. When you're young, death feels like a story that happens to other people, and glory feels like proof that you mattered. He boards the ships. The oars dip. The sea opens. The wind smells of distance. And the world begins to move toward the moment when a friend will die, and a prince will be dragged, and a small arrow will find a heel. But not yet. Not tonight. For now, just listen to the water under the hull. That slow, steady sound. Like breathing, let it carry you down. Down and down. The ships do not feel heroic when you are actually on them. They feel cramped, damp, alive in the wrong way, like an animal you've climbed inside and now have to pretend you're comfortable in its ribs. The wood sweats salt. The ropes creak in little complaints that never stop. When the sea is calm, it's almost worse, because you can hear every small sound. A man clearing his throat, the soft scrape of a cup against the deck, the faint clink of bronze as someone shifts their armor like they're trying to settle their nerves. Achilles stands near the prow more often than he sits, not because he's always restless, though he is. It's because he likes the air out there. He likes how the wind hits his face hard enough to make his eyes water. It feels honest. It feels like the world is telling him, without words, that this is real. Sometimes he watches the foam peel away from the hull and thinks about his mother. I always feel strange describing Achilles as sentimental, because people like to paint him as a pure weapon. But you know the feeling, don't you? When you're leaving somewhere and you try to act brave, and then one ordinary detail, an old smell, a song line, the way light falls on water makes your chest tighten. Achilles is young. He is proud. He is also, quietly, a son. And somewhere in his mind, like a splinter you can't pull out, is the thought of that prophecy. Short life, long name. The sea doesn't care. The sea keeps moving the way it always has, folding itself and unfolding. Blue turning to gray, gray turning to black at night, moonlight laying a thin, pale road across the waves, like something you could walk on if you were foolish enough to try. When they reach Alice, the mood changes. It's not the clean, pine-scented world of Chiron's mountain anymore. This place tastes of smoke and crowding. Hundreds of ships pulled up like beached whales. Men everywhere, men yelling. Men laughing too loudly. Men sharpening blades as if metal can calm the mind. Fires burn day and night, and the air is thick with grease and ash. If you breathe in deep, you can almost feel the soot settle inside you, and there is no wind. That's the first omen. The sails hang slack like tongues cut from mouths. The sea in the harbor barely moves. It's as if the world itself is holding its breath, refusing to help. Agamemnon, the High King, stands at the center of this stalled army like a knot in a rope. He is a man who looks like authority. Broad shoulders, heavy brow, the kind of eyes that assume they will be obeyed. But even he can't command the sky. Men whisper. They always do. In armies. An army is made of bodies, yes, but also of stories. Rumors move faster than horses. Some say Artemis is angry. Some say Agamemnon offended her, killed a sacred deer, bragged too loudly. The details change depending on who's talking, but the shape of it stays the same. A goddess has put her hand over the wind's mouth. To get the wind back, the priests say, a sacrifice must be made. And not just any sacrifice. Not a goat, not a bull. A girl, Iphigenia, Agamemnon's daughter. That detail has always made me go cold, even though I've known it for years. A king bringing an army together, promising glory. And then, at the first snag, being told the price is his own child. Achilles hears the whispers the way you hear thunder through walls, muffled at first, easy to ignore, and then a word catches, repeats, grows teeth. A girl, a sacrifice. He doesn't know her. He's not tied to her by blood, and still, something in him stiffens. Because Achilles, this is the thing people forget, was raised by a teacher who knew medicine, raised in a place where life mattered, in a practical way, where you set a bone because you don't want the animal to limp, where you treat a wound because you don't want the person to die. War is one thing. War is honest in its own ugly way. Two sides choosing violence, at least pretending they chose it. But this, a child brought to an altar because the sky won't blow? There are versions where Achilles is engaged to Iphigenia, tricked into believing the girl is coming for marriage. There are versions where he tries to stop it, where he's furious, where he's young enough to believe he can wrestle a decision away from kings and gods. And there are versions where he arrives too late. I don't know which one feels worse. I can picture it either way. The smell of fresh-cut flowers meant for a wedding, crushed under frantic feet. The sharp scent of sacrificial smoke. The hush that falls over a crowd when the knife is lifted. And Achilles, whether he's there or not feeling, for the first time, that this war is already eating the innocent before it even begins. The wind returns. That's the cruelest part. One day, the sails suddenly shiver, as if the air has remembered its job. A breeze slides across the harbor, brushing sweat off men's skin. It feels gentle. It feels like forgiveness. It is not forgiveness. It is payment being accepted. The ships leave. The sea opens again, and the army moves like a dark tide toward Troy. The first sight of the Trojan coast is not dramatic the way songs make it. It's just land. A line at the edge of water, low and pale. Then dunes, then scrub, then the distant suggestion of walls. But something happens inside men when they see the enemy's shore. It's like the air thickens. The jokes stop. The laughter turns forced. Hands tighten on spears. Every man suddenly remembers his own name, his own father, the small home he may never see again. Achilles feels it too, and he hates that he feels it. He wants to be fearless. He wants to be pure flame. Instead, he feels his stomach knot, and he swallows hard, and the taste in his mouth is dry. You know that feeling? Right before something huge happens, your body does its own math. Your mind tries to float away into the future, into what if, into maybe. Achilles pulls himself back by staring at the details. The way a rope fiber frays, the way sunlight glitters on a wet shield, the tiny, stupid persistence of a gull crying overhead. When they hit the shore, it's chaos, sand spraying, men shouting, the slap of water against legs, the clatter of armor as someone stumbles, a spear thrown too early, splashing uselessly into waves, and then the first real sound of battle on this foreign beach, a scream that doesn't stop when it should. Achilles moves like a storm breaking, not graceful, not beautiful, effective. He runs forward, and the sand gives under his feet, and for a split second he feels the instability of it, how the ground itself is uncertain here, and then he doesn't feel it anymore. He becomes something that doesn't need stable ground. His spear finds flesh, his sword finds bone. I won't linger on gore in a way that wakes you, not tonight, but I'll tell you the truth of it softly. Killing is not like the stories. It's not clean. It's not quick. A man's body resists dying the way a mouth resists swallowing something bitter. There are sounds you don't expect. Wetness, heat, the sudden heaviness of a limb that was moving a moment ago. Achilles learns that truth with every strike. And still, the army needs him. They lean on him the way a collapsing roof leans on its last beam. For 9 years, 9, this war drags on. It's hard to hold that number in your mind, isn't it? We imagine Troy as a single blazing season, but it was long. It was waiting. It was boredom stitched to terror, day after day after day. Men get sunburned. Men get sick. Men gamble. Men dream of home and wake up angry. The camp smells of sweat, stale wine, fish, damp cloth that never fully dries. When it rains, the mud clings like a curse to ankles. When it's hot, flies gather in black clouds over everything, including the dead. Achilles becomes a name the Trojans fear. He raids nearby towns. He takes captives. He takes prizes, because that's how this army measures worth, by what you can drag back to your tent. This is where the story turns sour in the mouth, because Achilles, for all his brilliance, is still part of an ugly system. He is rewarded with women like their objects, as if a person can be stacked beside golden armor and called a prize. Briseis comes into his life that way. She is taken from her home, her city burned, her family shattered. In some tellings, Achilles kills her husband. In others, she is simply seized amid the ruin. Either way, she ends up in Achilles' tent, not because she chose him, but because war chose for her. And yet, humans are complicated. Even in cages, the heart does strange things. There are moments where Briseis speaks to him, where her voice is not just fear, not just bitterness. There are moments where Achilles hears himself listening. I always feel unsettled here, because it's tempting to soften Achilles, to say he loved her, to say he was kind. Maybe he was, sometimes. But kindness inside a stolen life is still shadowed. It doesn't erase the theft. The Greek camp, meanwhile, is a pot left too long on the fire. Agamemnon, the king of kings, takes a woman too, Chryseis, and her father, a priest of Apollo, comes begging for her return. He brings ransom. He brings prayer. He brings that trembling hope people have when they believe authority might have mercy. Agamemnon refuses, and Apollo, hearing the priest's grief, sends plague. This is one of those myth moments that feels almost physical to me. I can imagine it, the air going wrong, the smell of sickness, sweet and rotten at once, men coughing at night, a wet, tearing cough that sounds like it's ripping them from the inside, fires burning more bodies than meat, dogs whining, the camp's noise changing from rowdy to anxious, like a room where everyone is pretending not to notice a bad smell. Achilles, who can kill men without trembling, cannot stand helplessness. He calls an assembly. Picture it. Men gathering in a rough circle, shifting weight, arms folded, eyes darting, the sun beating down on helmets until the metal is too hot to touch, dust hanging in the air like breath that won't settle. A seer speaks. The truth is named. Apollo is angry. The girl must be returned. Agamemnon, cornered, agrees, but with a demand that reveals exactly what kind of man he is. If he gives up his prize, he will take another. He will take Achilles' prize, Briseis. Achilles' anger blooms so fast, it's almost frightening. It isn't only about Briseis, it's about honor. In that world, honor is not a feeling, it's a currency. To have your prize taken is to be publicly reduced. It's like being told, in front of everyone, that your worth can be stolen by a louder voice. Achilles stands there, hands clenched, jaw rigid, and you can almost hear his teeth grind. He thinks about drawing his sword right there, cutting down Agamemnon in the dust. He imagines it one clean motion, the king's blood dark on the ground, the shock on men's faces. And then Athena appears, at least in the story, a goddess pulling him back from the edge, grabbing his hair, invisible to others, whispering restraint. Whether you believe the goddess is literal, or you see her as the voice of survival inside Achilles, the effect is the same. He does not kill Agamemnon, but he does something else. He breaks. He withdraws. He swears he will not fight. You can feel the silence that follows that decision, can't you? Not peaceful silence. The kind of silence that happens when something essential has been removed from a room. and everyone realizes the air is thinner. Briseis is taken from his tent. Imagine that moment, slowly, because it's the kind of moment that makes history tilt. The soldiers who come for her avoid Achilles' eyes. They don't want to meet the gaze of a man who could kill them without effort. Their hands shake. Their voices are stiff. "We have orders," they say, as if orders are a shield. Briseis stands, maybe holding herself very still, because sometimes stillness is the only dignity left. Maybe she looks at Achilles. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she's learned not to hope for rescue. Achilles watches her go, and the fire inside him doesn't explode outward. It collapses inward, becoming something colder. He goes to the shore. This part always feels intimate, like overhearing someone's prayer when you weren't meant to. Achilles walks alone. The sand is cooler near the water, damp and packed. The waves make that endless, patient sound. The same sound they made when he left home. The same sound they will make long after his bones are dust. He calls to his mother, not with a grand speech, with something raw. Thetis rises from the sea again, and I can imagine the droplets on her skin catching moonlight like tiny stars. I can imagine Achilles' voice shaking, not from fear, but from humiliation, because humiliation is a kind of wound that bleeds inside. He asks her to punish the Greeks, to make them feel what it's like to lose him. Thetis listens, and you can almost see her face, tighten with sorrow, because she knows what granting this request will do. She knows it will bring Achilles closer to his end, but she also loves him, and love, sometimes, is not wise. She goes to Zeus. She begs. She bargains. And Zeus, king of gods, keeper of balance, nods. The Greeks will suffer without Achilles. The Trojans will push them back. Men will die who might have lived, all because a king couldn't bear to lose a prize without taking another. That is the dark heartbeat of this story. Not monsters, not dragons, but pride. So Achilles stays in his tent while the war rages, and it's not restful. It's a caged stillness. It's pacing. It's listening to distant screams and pretending they are not his responsibility. His men, the Myrmidons, sit with him, restless as chained dogs. Patroclus sits with him too. Patroclus. Yes, we need to speak his name softly, because it is going to become a bell that rings through everything that follows. Patroclus is older than Achilles in some tellings, younger in others, but in every telling he is close. Not a follower exactly, not a servant. Something more, a companion who knows Achilles' moods the way you know the creaks of your own house at night. When Achilles is furious, Patroclus does not match the fury. He steadies it. When Achilles is silent, Patroclus does not fill the silence. He keeps the silence company. I've always found that kind of friendship haunting, because it feels like safety. And in these stories, safety is often just the part of the cliff that looks solid before it breaks. Night after night, Achilles lies awake. He hears the surf. He hears the distant clamor from the front lines. He smells smoke, carried on wind. Sometimes he tastes salt and realizes it's not sea spray. It's tears he didn't notice, and the Greeks begin to lose. Not a little, not gently. The Trojans, led by Hector, push them hard. The Greek ships are threatened. Fire is brought near the hulls. Panic spreads like oil. Achilles could stop it. Everyone knows it. The Greeks know it. The Trojans know it. Achilles knows it most of all, and still he stays. Because a wound to pride can feel, in that strange internal logic, more urgent than any external disaster. That is where part 2 leaves us. In a camp that smells of fear, with ships that might burn, with a man sitting in his tent, like a storm refusing to break, while the world outside begs for him to move. Listen to the waves for a moment. They don't sound angry. They sound steady, as if they have all the time in the world. The night the ships almost burn has a particular smell. It is not just smoke. It is pitch warming in the seams of wood. It is the bitter bite of torch oil. It is wet sand kicked up by running feet and pressed into ankles, mixing with sweat until every step feels heavy, like the earth is trying to keep you. You can hear the sea slapping the hulls, small, stubborn sounds while men scream as if the water might answer them. Inside Achilles' tent, the air is different, quieter, thick with the kind of silence that isn't peace, the kind that makes you notice your own breathing, and then, because you notice it, it becomes uneven. The lamp flame wavers whenever someone outside rushes past, and the shadows on the canvas walls jerk like nervous animals. Achilles sits with his back against a chest of gear, one knee drawn up, fingers flexing and unflexing. He isn't asleep. He hasn't really slept for days. When he closes his eyes, he sees a line of fire crawling over the beached ships, and then he sees Agamemnon's face, and then he sees nothing at all, just that flat, empty darkness that presses on the eyelids. Patroclus steps in and hesitates. You know that pause people do when they are about to ask for something that will change everything? That little fraction of time where the mouth opens, then closes, as if the question has weight, and the tongue isn't sure it can lift it. Patroclus has that pause. His hair is damp from the sea air. His hands smell faintly of bronze, because he's been helping the wounded. There's blood on his wrists, washed, but not fully gone. Blood stains like memory. Achilles, he says, and the name, spoken softly, lands in the tent like a stone in shallow water. It makes ripples. Achilles looks up, eyes bright in the lamplight, not with joy, not with curiosity, but with that hard alertness he wears like armor now. Patroclus keeps his voice low, not because he's afraid of Achilles, but because he knows anger is a sleeping animal. You don't shout near it. The line is breaking, he says. They're at the ships. Achilles' jaw tightens. He already knows. Everyone knows. The whole camp is a body, and the fear is traveling through it like fever. Patroclus steps closer, the canvas floor creaking under his sandals. He stops at arm's length, respectful, but there's something in his posture that is insistent, like a candle leaning toward a draft. "Let me go," Patroclus says. Achilles doesn't answer right away. His gaze flicks, briefly, to the armor piled near the tent pole, his armor, gleaming even in dim light. The helmet like a curled shell, the breastplate catching the flame and returning it. Patroclus follows the gaze. He swallows. "Let me wear it," he says. "Let them think it's you." The words hang there, and for a moment, Achilles' face does something almost childlike, an expression that says, "No, that's impossible. You don't ask that. You don't touch that." Then the expression hardens again, the mask returning. "No," Achilles says, simple as a wall. Patroclus exhales through his nose, a slow breath, like he's steadying himself. He doesn't retreat. That's what makes him Patroclus. He doesn't retreat from Achilles' weather. "If they see your crest," he says, "if they see your horses, if they see your armor, they'll pull back. The men will breathe again. We'll buy time." Achilles' fingers curl into the fabric of his cloak. You can see the knuckles pale. He looks past Patroclus, as if he can see through the tent wall, and out to the shore where the fire is. "You'll die," Achilles says. He says it as if the statement is obvious, like saying, "The sea is wet." Patroclus's mouth tightens. He doesn't deny it. That's the worst part. He doesn't deny it because he knows death is already walking the camp. He's been stepping over bodies all day. He has smelled the sweet, sick odor of infection. He has held men while they shook and cried for mothers. "I might," Patroclus says, "but they will die if nobody goes." Achilles stares at him. There are 1,000 things Achilles could say. He could say, "You are mine. You can't." He could say, "I love you. Don't." He could say, "I am angry and I don't care." But what comes out is smaller, rougher. Agamemnon did this, Achilles says. and there's a trembling underneath the words. Not fear, something closer to rage, exhausted into sorrow. He took what was mine. He made me small. Patroclus's eyes soften, and that softness is dangerous, because it makes Achilles feel seen. I know, Patroclus says. I know. But the ship's Achilles. The ships are our way home. Home. That word slips under Achilles' ribs. For a second, he sees Phthia. He sees green slopes. He hears Chiron's calm voice. He smells pine and clean water. He feels, absurdly, the weight of a cloak drying by a fire. Not glory, not prophecy, just living. Then the image shatters, because outside, a man screams. Achilles shuts his eyes, just for a heartbeat. When he opens them, his decision is already there, like a bruise forming. Take it, he says. Patroclus's breath catches. But, Achilles continues, and his voice drops even lower. Listen to me. Drive them from the ships. Do not chase them to the walls. Do you hear me? Do not chase Hector. Do not try to be me. Patroclus nods quickly. Too quickly. The way people nod when they want to accept an order and also want to outrun their own fear. Achilles stands and moves to the armor. Watching someone put on armor is like watching a ritual. Each piece has a sound. Leather straps whisper. Bronze rings click. The breastplate settles with a dull, final thud. Achilles' hands are sure, practiced. He lifts the helmet and holds it for a second, staring into its hollow like staring into a mouth. Then he places it on Patroclus's head. The crest falls over Patroclus like a shadow. Achilles ties the chin strap himself. His fingers linger a fraction too long, as if he wants to memorize the shape of Patroclus's jaw through leather. Patroclus smiles, small, brave. You'll be back, Achilles says. Not as a promise, more like an attempt at one. Patroclus touches Achilles' forearm. Just once, a human touch among all that metal. Then he turns and leaves, and the tent flap falls, and Achilles is alone with the sound of war. From the ridge by the shore, Achilles watches. It is strange to see your own shape moving far away. The armor flashes in torchlight. The crest bobs. Men shout, Achilles! And their voices rise with sudden hope, like drowning men seeing a hand. The Myrmidons surge forward behind Patroclus, dark and disciplined. And the Trojans, yes, they falter. They fall back the way a wave pulls away from shore. The line loosens. The pressure eases. The fires near the ships sputter, as men are cut down before they can feed them. For a brief, trembling hour, the world looks as if it might turn kinder. Patroclus fights like someone trying to outrun fate. He drives them from the sand. He pushes them across the plain. Achilles can see it even from afar. The Trojans' movement turning frantic, the Greeks' posture lifting, spines straightening, breath coming easier. The sound changes. Less panic, more rhythm, the steady clack of shields and spears. But then Patroclus keeps going. Achilles sees it, and his stomach drops, because the distance between the fight and the Trojan walls shrinks, and the sun, lowering, throws long shadows, and Patroclus's armored figure is now framed against that immense ancient stone. Achilles can't hear Patroclus's thoughts, but I can imagine them. That intoxication of success. That moment when you think, if I just do a little more, if I just push a little further, I can end this. I can be the hero they think I am. I can be Achilles. Near the gates, the air is thick with dust and heat. The ground is hard-baked. The smell of crushed grass rises under trampling feet. And above it all, the walls stand indifferent, holding the city's breath behind them. Hector comes. Hector, the Trojan prince, the man who fights not for prizes, but for his home. When I say his name, I always picture tired eyes. I picture hands that have held a child and a spear in the same day. He sees the armor and believes it is Achilles. And that belief turns the moment into a knot. They clash, bronze on bronze, a bell-like sound that rings and rings in the skull. Spears glance off shields, leaving bright scratches. Men around them hesitate, drawn by the gravity of the duel. The world narrows to two figures in a storm of dust. Patroclus is good, very good. Chiron's lessons were in Achilles' body, and Patroclus has learned Achilles' movements by living near him, by watching, by sparring, by loving. Still, he is not Achilles, and the gods are watching. Apollo moves like a cold breath. In some tellings, he strikes Patroclus from behind, a numbness flooding the arms, the knees buckling. In others, he simply darkens Patroclus's mind for a blink, makes the hand slip, makes the shield angle wrong. It doesn't matter how it happens. It happens. Patroclus staggers. A Trojan warrior Euphorbus wounds him first, a spear sliding into flesh where the armor parts. The wound is not instantly fatal, but it is enough. It is the first crack. Hector steps in. He drives his spear into Patroclus. Imagine the moment, not with screaming, but with that terrible hush that can fall inside a person when the body realizes what has occurred. Patroclus's breath leaves him. The world tilts. The sky above Troy is painfully blue, indifferent. Dust clings to his lips. The inside of the helmet smells of sweat and iron. Patroclus falls. He lies on the ground, and the armor that made men chant his name now pins him like a coffin lid. Hector leans close, and Patroclus's voice, thin, cracking, speaks prophecy in the story. He says, Achilles will kill Hector. He says death is coming. Hector, for all his courage, for all his love of home, still does what war teaches men to do. He strips the armor. He takes Achilles' shining skin from Patroclus's body. Achilles sees, from far away, the flash of his own helmet in Trojan hands, and he knows, before any messenger runs, before any shouted report reaches him, Achilles knows, a kind of knowing that is not thought, but impact. He stands frozen, the sea wind cold on his face, and his ears fill with a roaring that is not the ocean. Then the cry comes out of him. It is not a heroic shout. It is a sound like an animal being torn open. It climbs from his gut and rips through his throat, and it keeps going until the air is gone, and still the sound tries to continue. The Myrmidons bring Patroclus's body back under cover of darkness, fighting to keep it from being dragged away. They lay him on a bier in Achilles' tent. The lamp is lit. The shadows are huge. Achilles kneels beside the body and touches the cold cheek through grime and dried blood. Patroclus's eyelashes are dusty. His mouth is slightly open, as if a last word got stuck there. Achilles' hands shake. He presses his forehead to Patroclus's brow, and for a moment, he looks so young, so broken, that the prophecy feels like a joke played by cruel gods. Why didn't you listen? Achilles whispers. The words are soft, but they scrape. Outside, the camp murmurs like a far-off hive. Men are frightened, not only of the Trojans now, but of Achilles. They know what grief can do to a man like that. They know grief can turn him into a weapon sharper than ever. Achilles sits up slowly. His face is wet. His eyes are empty. In that emptiness, something settles. It is not calm. It is a decision so final, it feels like stone. He will return to war. Not for Agamemnon, not for the army, not for glory, for Patroclus, and for the dark, quiet satisfaction of making the world hurt back. He rises, and the lamplight catches the salt tracks on his cheeks, and for a second, they look like thin scars. He steps outside the tent. The night air hits him cold. The sea is black. The stars are sharp points, indifferent as spear tips. Achilles stares toward Troy, and somewhere in the darkness, like a drum beginning far away, the next chapter starts to beat. Down by the surf, where foam gnaws at pebbles and retreats, Thetis hears him. I always imagine it the way you hear a familiar voice in a crowded market. You don't process words, you feel the shape of it. Her son's grief travels over water. It slips between reeds. It touches the sea floor. The nymphs around her stop singing. Even fish, if fish can pause, seem to pause. She rises from the salt dark, like a pale thought surfacing. Water sheets from her hair. The moon turns each drop into a bead of cold light. And she, immortal, ancient, feels something helpless, that she cannot unmake what has been spoken by fate. She walks toward the camp without footprints, wet sand smoothing behind her as if the shore wants to forget. Each step is silent. Even the air seems to hold its breath. For him, for you. When Thetis enters Achilles' tent, the lamp flame bends toward her as if the room itself recognizes an older kind of power. She does not speak at first. She looks at Patroclus's body, at the stillness that no god can reverse, and something like salt, grief, gathers in her eyes. Then she looks at Achilles, and her immortal face seems to falter, because this broken thing is her son. But Achilles does not rise. He sits on the ground with his knees drawn up, one hand resting on Patroclus's chest, as if he can keep the soul from drifting farther away. His fingers are stained dark. His nails have dirt under them. He looks like a man who has been digging his own grave with his hands. "Mother," he says, and the word is flat. Thetis kneels beside him. Her skin smells of the sea at night, cold, mineral, clean in a way that makes human blood seem suddenly loud. She touches his hair, slicking it back from his forehead, and for a moment, Achilles leans into the touch the way a child leans into a blanket. "I heard you," she whispers, "all the way under the waves." Achilles' throat works. He blinks slowly. The tears are gone now, not because grief ended, but because grief has turned into something heavier. "They took my armor," he says. Thetis nods. She already knows. The sea hears many things. "I will get you new," she says. Achilles gives a humorless, tiny laugh that sounds like a scrape of stone. "You can't give me him," he says, and the bitterness in the word him is sharp enough to cut. "So what is armor?" Thetis's mouth tightens, as if she is holding back a truth she has carried since his birth. "I can't give you him," she agrees, "but I can keep you from walking naked into your death." Achilles stares at her. You can feel the prophecy between them like a draft in the tent. Achilles has always known. Thetis has always known. The story has always known. If he returns to war, he will not return to home. And still, Achilles' hand tightens on Patroclus's chest. Then, slowly, he releases it, as if letting go of a lifeline. "Go," he says to Thetis. "Think. Bring me what you can." Thetis rises, and the air tastes suddenly of storm. When she leaves, it is not like a woman walking away. It is like the tide turning. The shadows shift. The canvas flutters. Men outside, who cannot see her, still feel a chill and rub their arms. She goes to Hephaestus. In the old stories, the forge of Hephaestus is not a place you reach by road. It is a place you reach by being led through dreamlike corridors of the sea, down and down, until the water becomes warm, and then hot, until you feel you are swimming through the breath of the earth. I always picture it with a strange tenderness. Bright fire trapped under the ocean, metal singing in a place no mortal lungs could bear, lamps of molten bronze, hammers that ring like distant thunder. Hephaestus receives Thetis with the weary politeness of someone who remembers kindness. Long ago, she saved him when he fell cast from Olympus. Broken, unwanted, she hid him. She nursed him. Even gods remember that kind of debt. "Lady of the deep," he says, and his voice is rough like gravel, warmed by sun. "Why do you come with salt on your cheeks?" Thetis doesn't waste time. She tells him of Patroclus. She tells him Achilles is going back. She tells him Achilles needs armor, and the words feel like a request for a coffin made beautiful. Hephaestus listens, his face lit by the forge, eyes reflecting flame. Then he will die, Hephaestus says quietly. Thetis' chin lifts. I know, she says. Make it anyway. That is how tragedy works. People ask for the tools that will complete it. Hephaestus nods once. Then he turns to his work. The forge becomes a kind of lullaby, if you listen the right way. Bellows exhale. Metal glows. Sparks leap and fall like brief stars. The air shimmers with heat. There is a rhythm to it. Hammer, pause. Hammer, pause. A heartbeat made of iron. Hephaestus shapes a helmet with a crest like flame. He shapes greaves that catch light the way fish scales catch it. He shapes a breastplate that curves to Achilles' chest, not merely protective, but intimate, like a second skin. And then he makes the shield. This is where the story turns strangely intimate. Hephaestus makes a shield and lays a whole world on it. Peace and war, plowed fields and harvested grain, dancers in a turning circle, and the restless sea at the edge. It is beautiful in the way a knife can be beautiful, precise, shining, made for what it will do. Thetis returns with the armor before dawn. The camp is quiet in that hour, not peaceful, just exhausted. Smoke from last night's fires hangs low and thin. Somewhere a man coughs in his sleep. Horses stamp and snort, nervous even while tethered, as if they smell the day's blood before it comes. Thetis enters Achilles' tent and lays the armor down. Bronze gleams in lamplight. It feels too bright for a room that has held death. Achilles looks at it, and his eyes flicker with something like longing, not for beauty, but for action, for something he can do with his hands that is not mourning. He rises. When he puts on the new armor, it sounds different than before, as if the metal itself knows it is being strapped onto a man who has crossed a line. Each buckle is a small, final click. Each strap drawn tight is a vow. Thetis watches, and I swear you can feel her wanting to speak, wanting to say, stay. But she is a mother of a doomed hero. Her love has learned to swallow words. When Achilles lifts the shield, it catches the first pale light of morning. A whole world flashes. He steps out of the tent. Men stop what they are doing. Conversations die. Even the gulls over the shore seem to tilt their flight. Achilles walks through the camp toward the beach, and the sand crunches under his greaves. The air is cold enough that each breath makes a faint mist. He can taste salt. He can taste smoke. He can taste the iron of his own resolve. At the edge of the water, he calls. His voice is not loud, but it carries, as if it has weight. My horses, he says. Xanthus and Balius are brought immortal horses, gifts of gods, their coats shining. They paw the sand, restless. Their eyes look too knowing. Achilles runs a hand along Xanthus's neck. The horse's skin twitches under the touch. The warmth of the animal is strangely comforting. You will carry me, Achilles murmurs. One more time. Then he mounts the chariot, and the Myrmidons gather, and the army, seeing him, feels fear and hope braided together. He goes to the battlefield like a storm. The Trojans, seeing the new armor, hesitate. It is not the old familiar gleam they stole. It is something else, something forged in godfire. Achilles drives them back. He kills without pause, spear thrusting, sword cutting, shield turning aside blows as if the world itself protects him. The dust rises around his wheels. Blood spatters the bronze, dark and warm, and then cools, and then flakes. Rivers run red. He survives, because fate wants him alive a little longer. At last, near the walls, Hector appears again. Hector has been inside the city. He has seen the terror in the eyes of those he loves. He has heard women praying. He has felt the weight of being the one who must stand outside the gate and become the shield. He steps out anyway, and when Achilles sees him, The world narrows to a point so sharp it hurts. They circle each other. The ground between them is trampled flat. The air is thick with sweat and dust. You can hear, in the distance, the dull roar of thousands of men trying not to breathe too loudly because something sacred is about to happen and they don't want to disturb it. Hector throws his spear. Achilles catches it on his shield, the impact traveling through his arm like a shock. The spear skitters away. Achilles throws. His spear strikes Hector's shield, bites into it, but does not kill. Now they are close. You can hear Hector's breath. It is not the breath of a monster. It is the breath of a man who is afraid and still chooses to stand. Achilles' blade flashes. Hector tries to strike, tries to guard, tries to live. But Athena, always meddling tricks, Hector in the myth, returns Achilles' spear, lies with a familiar face. Again, the exact mechanics don't matter. The shape of the tragedy stays the same. The gods lean the scales. Achilles drives his spear into the soft place at Hector. In that second, I always feel something twist in my own chest, because Hector is not evil. He is simply the one on the other side of Achilles' grief. Hector falls. His blood darkens the dust. His mouth opens, and words come. Not screams, but pleas. "Give my body back," Hector whispers. "To my father, to my mother." Achilles looks down at him, and what stares back from Achilles' face is not pity. It is a coldness so clean it feels like winter. "No," Achilles says. "Dogs and birds will have you." Hector's gaze flickers toward the walls, where people are watching, where a wife might be watching, where a child might someday ask why the world is like this. Then the light leaves Hector's eyes. Achilles is not done. This is the part that always makes my stomach sink, even when I tell it softly. He pierces Hector's ankles with leather thongs. He ties the body to his chariot. He drags it. The sound is not loud, but unforgettable. Bone scraping, armor clinking, dust swallowing flesh. Achilles circles the city, over and over, like a planet orbiting vengeance. Inside Troy, Priam watches, an old king, hands trembling on the wall stone, watching his son's body bounce and spin behind the chariot of the man who killed him. I cannot describe that pain fully. I don't think anyone can. But you can imagine it, can't you? That feeling of wanting to climb down and gather the body into your arms and being unable because the world has turned into a machine that grinds fathers into witnesses. Days pass. Achilles will not give the body back. He keeps Hector in his camp, and every morning he drags him again, as if he thinks the motion will grind grief out of his own bones. The body, by some mercy or curse, does not rot as it should. The gods preserve it, not to protect Hector, but to keep the insult vivid. Patroclus is burned on a pyre. The smoke rises thick and gray. It smells of fat and hair and resin. Achilles throws locks of his own hair into the fire, a gift to the dead. The flames lick and snap. The heat makes the skin on your face feel tight. He holds the pyre, the smoke thick as a blanket, and even the contests that follow feel muted, like men playing at life beside a grave. And still, at night, Achilles hears Patroclus, not as a voice, maybe, more like a presence pressing against the edge of sleep, that half-dream where you reach for someone in the dark and your hand finds only cold air. Then comes the quietest invasion of all. Priam walks into the Greek camp. Think of it. An old man crossing enemy lines, guided by a god in disguise, stepping between sleeping warriors, past watchfires that crackle low. The night is deep. The stars are thin. The air smells of ash and sheep fat. Priam's feet are bare, or nearly bare in some versions, and I like to imagine the discomfort. Stones biting, frost-numbing toes, the way the ground feels too vast when you are small and old. He reaches Achilles' tent. He enters. Achilles looks up and sees him. and for a heartbeat he thinks it is a ghost. Priam does not beg like a king. He begs like a father. He kneels. His hands, which have held scepters, reach out and clasp Achilles' knees. "I kiss the hands that killed my son," Priam says, and that line is so obscene, so tender, so impossible, that even Achilles flinches, because in that moment, Achilles sees his own father. He sees Peleus, old someday, waiting for a son who will not return. The room changes. The hatred loosens, not gone, loosened, like a fist unclenching. Painful because the muscles have been tight for too long. Achilles' eyes fill. He and Priam weep together, not like warriors, like human beings whose lives have been emptied by the same war. Achilles lifts Priam up. He offers him food, bread, wine, simple things that feel shocking after so much killing. Then he agrees. He will return Hector's body. They wash Hector. They anoint him with oil. They wrap him in clean cloth. The body looks almost peaceful, and that is a strange mercy, because we know what it cost. When Priam leaves with his son, dawn is beginning. A pale, thin light spreads over the camp, touching spear tips, touching tents, touching the sea. Achilles stands at the edge of his tent and watches the cart roll away. His armor is stained, his hands empty. Inside him, the prophecy keeps its pulse. He has returned one body and lost another, forever. Dawn thins the dark into something like sleep. After Priam leaves, the camp does not become kinder. It becomes quieter. That is different. Quiet can be a blanket. Quiet can also be a lid on a pot that is still boiling. Achilles sits alone near the surf, where the sea keeps doing what it has always done. Arrive, withdraw, arrive again, unimpressed by heroes. The tide slides over pebbles with that small, patient sound, as if the world is whispering the same sentence over and over until you finally accept it. He watches the cart's tracks fade in the sand. There is a strange emptiness in him now. The sharp edge of anger is dulled, not healed, dull, like a blade used too long. And in that dulled place, grief spreads wider. Grief is clever like that. When rage stops taking up the whole room, grief walks in and sits down as if it owns the chair. You can tell when a man has stopped fighting his sorrow. His shoulders sink in a way that isn't fatigue. His eyes stop scanning for threats. His hands, when they rest, look uncertain, as if they have forgotten what they were built to do. Achilles hears the name Patroclus in the creak of oars, in the crackle of watchfires, in the faint groan of wounded men turning in sleep. He tries to sleep and finds that sleep has become a corridor with too many doors, and behind each door is a memory that won't stay polite. When he finally does drift, it is not rest, it is a slow fall. He dreams of the shield Hephaestus made, the little figures moving on it, farmers plowing, dancers turning, a wedding feast, a courtroom, and then, in the dream, he leans closer and sees that the tiny figures have faces. Patroclus's face is there, repeated, woven into the metal like a curse. Achilles tries to touch it, and the shield is suddenly hot, burning his palms, and he wakes up with his fingers clenched so hard his nails have cut crescents into his skin. In the morning, the men look at him as if he is a weather system. They wait to see which direction the storm will move. Agamemnon sends messages again, softer now, apologetic, offering gifts, women, gold. Achilles hears the offers and feels nothing. It is almost frightening how little he feels. The old Achilles would have flared. This Achilles sits with his back against a ship's hull and lets the words pass over him like rain, because the war is not done. Because Troy does not crumble simply because Hector is gone. The Trojans are wounded, yes, but wounded things bite. They have new leaders, new fury, and the gods, as always, cannot resist stirring the pot. The truce for Hector's funeral ends, and the next wave comes. It arrives in the form of women, not the women taken as prizes, not the women weeping behind walls. Warriors, queens. Strange as it sounds to people who only want their myths neat and masculine, there are stories of a new force riding toward Troy women from the edge of the world. Their horses, breathing frost, their arrows singing. The first name the Greeks hear is Penthesilea, Amazon, daughter of Ares, a woman who lives with war in her bones the way Achilles does. Some say she comes to help Troy out of honor. Some say she comes because her own hands are stained with a killing she cannot unmake an accident, a sister dead by her spear, and she believes death in a glorious battle will be a kind of cleansing. I always feel something sad in that. The way people think a beautiful death can wash a painful life. It never does. It only adds another body to the pile. When Penthesilea enters the Trojan gates, the city's mood shifts. The air seems to lift, as if hope has a scent. The soldiers on the walls straighten. The women in courtyards stop wringing their hands for a moment. Priam, old and hollow, watches her and sees another shield being carried to the front. Outside the walls, the Greeks notice the change before they understand it. Their scouts return with wide eyes. A woman, they say, and not like the others. A woman in armor. A woman who rides like she was born on the horse's back. Achilles hears and something in him stirs. Not desire, not simple curiosity, recognition. Because Achilles knows what it is to be a weapon and also a person. He knows what it is to be pushed forward by prophecy and praise until your own name becomes louder than your own heartbeat. On the day Penthesilea rides out, the sky is pale and tight. The kind of sky that makes every sound travel farther. The plain between camp and city is littered with the debris of months' broken spear shafts, scraps of leather, stray bones that no one dares to name. Penthesilea's horse is dark, almost black. Her armor catches the sun in sharp flashes. A crescent blade hangs at her side. Her hair is braided close to her scalp, practical, severe. Her face, yes, let's say it plainly. Her face is beautiful in the way storms are beautiful. Not soft, not inviting, dangerous. She comes with her Amazons, and they move like a school of fish together, coordinated, swift. The battle that follows is not the usual grinding chaos. It has a strange elegance. The Amazons fight with speed, with angles. They dart, they strike, they retreat. Greek lines wobble as if someone has kicked a table leg. Men die fast. You can hear the difference in the dying. The usual battlefield has drawn-out screams, men calling for help. Today, there are sudden cut-offs, throats opened, breaths stolen, a hush punctuated by short cries. The plain becomes a place where life is snipped like thread. Achilles watches at first from the edge, as if he is studying a mirror that does not want to reflect him cleanly. Then Penthesilea rides toward the Greek center, and the men scatter, and someone shouts Achilles' name not as a chant, but as a plea. Achilles climbs into his chariot. The horses surge. The wheels bite into dirt. The air slaps his face cold. His armor is heavy, but his body remembers how to be lightning. It is cruel, how quickly the body remembers killing. He drives straight into the thick. Spears glance off his shield. Arrows rattle against his breastplate. He doesn't slow. He doesn't look left or right. He is a line drawn through the world. Penthesilea sees him. Her gaze locks with his through the dust, and for a moment it feels like the battlefield pauses just a breath, just enough for you to notice how the sun glints on bronze, and how the dust makes halos around moving bodies. They meet. I want you to imagine the sounds. The first clash is not a cinematic ringing. It is a deep, ugly thunk, metal impacting with the solid force of muscle behind it. Achilles' spear slides along her shield's rim, scraping sparks. Her blade slashes at his chariot rail, biting wood. She is fast. Faster than most men Achilles has faced. She rides close enough that Achilles can smell the oil on her armor. the faint scent of horse sweat, the sharp tang of iron. He swings, she ducks, she laughs, brief, fierce, as if she is enjoying the danger. That laugh pierces Achilles in a way he doesn't expect. It sounds like someone refusing to be afraid. Their fight becomes a knot of movement. Chariot wheels turn tight circles. Horses rear and snort. The ground under them churns into mud, mixed with blood. Around them, men hesitate, unable to decide whether to join or to watch. There is a strange respect in their distance, like they are witnessing something sacred and murderous. Achilles lands a blow on her shoulder. Her armor dents. She grunts, not collapsing, but it changes her balance for half a heartbeat. Half a heartbeat is enough. Achilles' spear finds the gap. It slides beneath her ribs. The moment of impact is strangely quiet. Penthesilea's eyes widen, not in fear, in surprise, like someone hearing their own name spoken from far away. She sways in the saddle. The horse keeps moving, obedient, confused, until she slips, and Achilles catches her, of all things by the straps of her armor, lowering her to the ground as the battle churns around them. She lies on her back, dust clinging to her eyelashes, her breath bubbling faintly at her lips. Achilles stands over her, spear still in his hand, and the world narrows again, but differently. He looks down at her face, and the old stories say something unsettling, that Achilles, in the instant after killing her, is struck by her beauty, that he feels a stab of regret, that he, who has killed countless men without a flicker, suddenly sees the person beneath the enemy. I have always found that both human and horrifying, because it means empathy arrives too late. It means the heart wakes up only when the body is already leaving. Achilles' chest tightens. He stares at her and thinks, absurdly, she should have lived. She should have ridden somewhere else. She should have been someone's sister, someone's friend, not a body on this dirt. Penthesilea's eyes meet his for a final moment. If she speaks, it is a whisper, swallowed by noise. Maybe she says nothing at all. Sometimes the most truthful deaths are silent. She dies, and Achilles stands there, and the grief inside him changes shape again. It adds a new layer, the grief of having recognized a kindred spirit only by destroying her. Then Thersites course, mocking laughs and says something ugly, something like, "You weep for her because you wanted her." Achilles turns. The spear is still in his hand. His face is still. His eyes are empty. He kills Thersites with one blow, not in battle, not with honor, with a sudden, flat violence that shocks the camp into silence. Even the Greeks, who love Achilles' killing when it faces outward, feel a chill when it faces inward. They whisper that he is mad. They whisper that grief has cracked him like ice, and maybe it has. The days after are thick with unease. The body of Penthesilea is stripped, as bodies are. Her armor is taken. Her horse is led away. Another story of a woman reduced to spoils. It sits wrong in the mouth. It sits wrong in the chest. Achilles cannot sleep. He walks the beach at night, listening to the sea. He thinks of Patroclus. He thinks of Hector's father kissing his knees. He thinks of Penthesilea's eyes widening in surprise. He thinks of how every face he remembers is a face he has helped remove from the world. The gods are not done. They send another champion to Troy, Memnon, son of Eos, goddess of dawn. Memnon arrives with Ethiopians, dark-armored, disciplined, their shields polished. His presence feels like dawn itself, stepping onto the battlefield bright, inevitable. When Memnon kills Antilochus, son of Nestor, the old king's grief rises like smoke. Antilochus was young, loyal, one of the few in the Greek camp whose goodness still seemed intact. Nestor weeps. Achilles hears the weeping and something in him stirs again. Not rage for Agamemnon's insult, not rage for prizes, but rage at the pattern. Young men dying, Fathers watching, the same story, repeated. He goes out to meet Memnon. The day of their duel, the sky is strangely clear. The air has that crispness that makes you feel as if you could see forever. The field is strewn with bodies that no one has had time to bury. Flies hover. The smell of blood has become almost normal, like a constant background note. Memnon stands tall, his armor dark with gold edges, his spear long. His face is calm. He is not boastful. He looks like a man who understands destiny the way Achilles does. They circle. No taunting, no long speeches. 2 instruments being positioned before they strike. Memnon's spear comes fast. Achilles' shield catches it. The impact rattles his arm. Achilles counters. Memnon pivots, agile, and their weapons flash and retract like the tongues of snakes. They are evenly matched for a moment, and that moment is intoxicating and terrifying. Because when you meet someone who can truly kill you, you feel alive in a way that is almost obscene. Then the gods decide. Zeus, it is said, weighs their fates on a scale. I always picture that scale as something invisible on the battlefield, an unseen tipping point that makes one man's foot slip, one man's breath come too late. Achilles strikes. His spear slips past Memnon's guard and drives into him. Memnon's body stiffens, then loosens. His eyes, like Hector's, widen. He falls. And then something strange happens. Eos, goddess of dawn, comes and weeps for her son. Her tears become dew, or so the myth says. The next morning, the ground is wet, as if the world itself cried overnight. Achilles watches the sky lighten and feels nothing like victory. He has killed another mirror, and the mirrors are running out. He returns to his tent and sits beside the armor, and the lamp flame flickers, and outside the sea keeps coming and going, as if trying to erase the footprints of every hero who ever thought he mattered. In the quiet, Achilles finally admits the thing he has been avoiding. He is moving toward his own end, not because he wants it, not because it will cleanse him, but because the story has been written, and the ink is blood. He thinks of his heel, that small, ridiculous vulnerability, that one spot where the world can find him. He flexes his foot in the dark, feeling the tendon tighten, feeling the bone, the skin, the pulse. You can almost hear how fragile it is, this one thread holding the tapestry. He lies down. He closes his eyes. And somewhere beyond the walls of Troy, in a temple, Apollo's statue stands still as stone. And if you listen with the imagination, you can hear a bowstring being tested just once, softly, like someone humming before a song. Not yet, but soon. The strange thing about fate is that it does not rush. It waits, like an arrow already nocked, the bow held steady. The arm does not tremble because the god holding it has all the time in the world. Human time, with its frantic little urgencies, means nothing to that kind of patience. After Memnon falls, the war shifts again. The Trojans lose another pillar, and their courage thins, but not enough to break. A city does not die quickly. A city dies the way a body dies. First the extremities go cold, then the breath becomes shallow, then the heart finally accepts what the world has decided. Achilles becomes the knife at Troy's throat. Day after day, he drives them back. The plain is scarred by chariot tracks that never fully fade. The dust is so constant, it settles into the seams of armor and the lines of men's faces, turning everyone into a moving statue. The smell of blood and sweat and horse turns into a kind of weather, and yet, in the Greek camp, there is no celebration. There is only a quiet, wary dependence. Men depend on Achilles, the way travelers depend on a bridge they fear might collapse. They cross quickly, eyes down, hoping the structure holds for one more day. Achilles himself moves like someone half asleep. He eats because his body demands it. Bread, meat, wine. The food tastes dull. Sometimes he chews without noticing and only realizes he has swallowed when his throat aches. He speaks rarely. When he does, his voice is low and flat, as if every word costs something. At night, he dreams of Patroclus again. Not heroic dreams, not the kind where the dead smile and reassure. The dreams are small and cruel. Patroclus sitting at the edge of the bed, silent, looking down at his own hands. Patroclus turning away when Achilles reaches. Patroclus standing in a doorway that is full of light, and Achilles cannot cross the threshold. One night, Achilles wakes with the taste of ash in his mouth. He sits up and listens. The camp is quiet. Far off, a dog barks once, then stops. The sea keeps its patient rhythm. The stars look sharp enough to cut. He steps outside and walks until he reaches the place where the river meets the sea. The river Xanthus. Scamander has seen too much blood. Achilles has choked it with bodies. In some tales, the river rose against him, trying to drown him, furious at being used as a grave. Achilles remembers the cold grip of water around his thighs, the pull, the panic, the shame of almost dying not to a spear, but to a current. He looks at the dark surface now and sees his own reflection wavering, a face lit by starlight, a face that should be famous, a face that feels like a mask. Is this what you wanted? He whispers to no one. The question is not for the gods, not really. It is for himself, for the boy he once was, before the war, before the prophecy hardened him. No answer comes, only the faint hiss of water over stones. The next morning, the fighting draws closer to the city again, and Achilles goes. He kills men whose names he never learns. He kills men who are barely old enough to grow full beards. He kills men who lift their shields and tremble because the rumor of him has reached their bones. Sometimes, in the middle of the violence, Achilles catches a glimpse of something human that makes him hesitate. Someone dropping a weapon to run, someone calling out a brother's name, and the hesitation is dangerous. It makes him angry with himself. He does not want his heart waking up now. Not now, when it has already failed to save anyone. So he hardens again. He becomes the blade. Near the Scaean gates, in the shadow of Troy's walls, Achilles begins to slaughter like a man trying to cut his way through time itself. As if enough killing might rewind the moment Patroclus left his tent. It cannot. The Trojans retreat behind their walls, and the Greeks, pressed against stone, cannot break the city open. So the war becomes siege and skirmish. Days, weeks, a stretch of time that feels like a long exhale. In that stretch, something almost tender happens. Achilles meets Polyxena, Priam's daughter, in some versions of the story, a girl on the edge of womanhood. Some say Achilles sees her in a temple. Some say he sees her from afar and is struck by the idea of softness, of peace. Some say he begins to imagine a different end, a marriage, a truce, an exit from the trap. I don't know which version is true. Myths are like firelight. They shift with every telling. But I do know the feeling is true. Even the darkest heart, even the most exhausted killer, sometimes reaches for the thought of something gentle, if only as a way to breathe. And the gods, oh, the gods notice that reach. Because hope is a kind of defiance. Apollo, who has hated Achilles from the beginning, for the desecration of his priest, for the arrogance of mortal strength, does not allow hope to grow roots. The moment fate chooses is small, almost ordinary. A skirmish near the gates, dust in the air, the sun high, making helmets hot to the touch. Achilles moving forward, his shield raised, his spear ready. Paris is there. Paris is not Hector. Paris is not a pillar. Paris is a man with soft hands and a bow, a man whose choices have already burned worlds, but who still does not look like the destroyer he is. He stands near the wall, partly shielded, his heart hammering. He can hear Achilles' name shouted on the plain. He can see Achilles' armor flashing like a signal to the gods. Paris lifts his bow. His fingers are slick with sweat. The bowstring bites into his skin. His breath catches, and for a moment he is just a frightened man aiming at a legend. Then Apollo moves, not like a giant hand, not like thunder, like a thought, like a whisper in the ear, like a subtle correction to the angle of the wrist. The arrow flies. You could almost miss it. That is the cruel part. You could be watching the clash of spears, the shining of shields, and not notice the thin line cutting through the air. It hums. It spins. It carries God guidance in its feathered tail. It strikes Achilles' heel. That small spot. That ridiculous thread. The pain is immediate and bright, like a spark driven into the nerve. Achilles' foot buckles. He stumbles. At first, it doesn't seem possible. Men do not expect Achilles to stumble. The world doesn't expect it. His own body doesn't expect it. He looks down. Blood is already spilling, dark against dust. The arrow protrudes at an obscene angle, as if the earth itself has bitten him. For a heartbeat, Achilles feels something almost like disbelief. Then, the battlefield surges around him. Trojans, seeing him falter, rush like wolves. Greeks rush to protect him. The air fills with shouts. The dust thickens. Achilles tries to stand fully. His leg shakes. The tendon has been cut. The strength that carried him through years of war suddenly has no purchase. It is like a great tree realizing its roots have been severed. He falls to one knee. He raises his shield anyway. Habit, pride, defiance. Spears strike the shield rim. A blade glances off his breastplate. Achilles swings his sword, still deadly, still fast in the upper body, but the lower body betrays him. Another spear finds a gap. Another blade. The myths disagree about the final blow. Some say Paris shoots again. Some say another Trojan finishes him. Some say Apollo himself ensures the end. What feels true, regardless, is this. Achilles dies not in a blaze of glory, but in a sudden collapse of inevitability. He falls. The world tilts. His cheek hits the dirt, and he tastes the plain dust. Blood, crushed grass. The sounds around him become muffled, as if he has slipped underwater. He can hear his own breath in his helmet, ragged, then slowing. And then, in that slowing, he sees Patroclus. Not as a dream this time, as a memory so vivid it feels like presence. Patroclus laughing in the shade of a ship. Patroclus handing him water. Patroclus sitting close, shoulder touching shoulder, saying nothing, because sometimes love is just silence shared. Achilles' eyes soften. He tries to speak. Maybe he says Patroclus' name. Maybe he says nothing. Maybe his mouth simply forms a shape that only the dead can read. Then the light thins. The Greeks fight like mad to retrieve his body. Ajax and Odysseus and others form a wall of shields, dragging him back, inch by inch, as arrows rain, as Trojans scream. They bring Achilles to the camp. They lay him where Patroclus lay. The tent, once full of anger, is now full of stillness. Thetis comes again, faster than grief should allow. She throws herself over his body and wails. The sound is not human. It is sea wind through stone. It makes men outside shiver and look away, ashamed to witness a mother's helplessness. The Myrmidons weep openly. The whole camp feels suddenly hollow, like a theater after the main actor has died backstage. They build a pyre. They wash Achilles' body. They anoint him with oil. They comb his hair. They try to make him look like a hero instead of a corpse. The armor Hephaestus's masterpiece stands nearby, empty now, as if it was always meant to be a shell waiting for abandonment. When the pyre is lit, the flames rise high, greedy. The heat presses against skin like a hand. The smoke climbs and spreads, carrying the scent of burned flesh and resin over the sea. Some say the ashes of Achilles and Patroclus are mixed. placed in one urn. The idea is tender and terrible. Even in death, they are not separated. The world that tore them apart cannot keep them apart forever. And yet, the war continues, because that is how wars are. They do not care that one great life has ended. They keep chewing. After the funeral, the Greeks hold games, racing, boxing, wrestling. There is laughter, even, not because they are happy, but because humans, when staring into a dark hole, sometimes throw pebbles into it just to hear a sound. Then comes the last insult. The armor of Achilles becomes a prize. Men argue. Odysseus, clever, wins it. Ajax, strong, loses and breaks under the humiliation, spiraling into madness and suicide. Even after Achilles' death, his shadow kills. Eventually, Troy will fall by trick, by horse, by fire, by night screams. But that is another story's ending. This story's ending is quieter. A tomb by the sea, waves arriving, withdrawing, ash in an urn, a mother returning to the deep with salt on her face. And somewhere, if you let yourself believe in the gentler part of myth, two souls, Achilles and Patroclus, walking away from the noise, toward a shore where no spears can follow. Just darkness, just peace, just the soft, endless breathing of the sea. Before you let your mind drift away from the flames, stay with me by the shore for a moment longer. Because after the pyre, after the chants and the pouring of wine into the sand, there is a particular silence that settles over a camp. Not safety, just people who have shouted for so long that their throats have forgotten ordinary sounds. Men sit on overturned helmets. They stare at their hands. They watch the smoke thread across the sky and feel, in some private place, that the smoke is threading through them too, stitching them to this loss, whether they want it or not. I always think about the small details no bard sings. How someone, some nameless boy from a nameless island, carries buckets of seawater to douse the embers once the main blaze has eaten its fill. Back and forth, the water sloshing, the salt stinging, the cuts on his fingers, each step a soft crunch as sandals grind ash into earth. How the smell lingers in hair and cloth. A man might wash, and still, days later, catch the faint scent of burned resin and feel his stomach tighten. When the ashes are gathered, they are light, so light, it feels wrong. Achilles, who could drag a man by the ankle and make dust rise behind him, reduced to gray that slips between fingers. Patroclus, too. Two lives that shook the world, quiet enough to fit inside a jar. And then, yes, the games. Not joy, distraction. The Greeks mark lanes in dirt, shout themselves hoarse, race horses until the ground shakes because motion is easier than stillness, and stillness would mean hearing their own thoughts. Then comes the last insult, the armor. It stands like an accusation, bright, flawless, made by a god, and now it has no body to fill it. The empty greaves look like open mouths. They decide it must go to the best of the remaining Greeks. Odysseus wins with words. Ajax, who has been a wall more than a voice, loses, and something in him collapses. He walks away too quiet, and later, in the dark, shame finishes what Troy could not. Even after Achilles dies, the war keeps eating. I tell you this not to make you tense, but to make you softer. When you see how even the strongest men are undone by grief, by pride, by the slow poison of comparison, you remember something gentle. You do not have to be invincible. You were never meant to be. In the end, Achilles' tomb rises near the sea, a mound that catches the light at certain hours. The wind makes a low sound against it, like breathing through parted lips. Gulls perch and look down as if judging the world. And if you imagine walking there at dusk, you can feel how the air changes. The salt is sharper. The horizon looks smoother. The noise of men, arguments, commands, boasts feels very far away. You can stand there and let the sea do its slow work on your thoughts. Arrive, withdraw, arrive again. The same sentence repeated until the mind loosens its grip and the darkness becomes a blanket. The night after the games, the Greek camp feels like a mouth missing a tooth. There is a gap where Achilles used to be a gap you can't stop touching with your tongue, even though it hurts. Men walk past his empty tent and instinctively lower their voices. Even the drunk ones do it, even the ones who swear they fear nothing. The canvas hangs slack, its ropes sighing in the sea breeze, and sometimes the fabric makes a soft flap, like a slow blink. I always notice the smallest sounds at moments like this. The creak of a ship's mast, the dull knock of a bucket against a hull, the faint scratch of a whetstone as someone sharpens a blade they may never get to use. Without Achilles, every ordinary sound becomes louder, as if the world is trying to fill the silence with anything it can find. Agamemnon holds counsel. Of course he does. Kings hate emptiness. They want to nail plans over the hole like boards over a broken window. Odysseus speaks the most. He is not the strongest man left. He is not the most beautiful. He is not the most beloved. But his mind moves like water slipping into cracks, finding the lowest point, wearing down stone without ever raising his voice. When he stands, the men lean forward without realizing it. His words do not clang like armor. They coil. They curl around the listener's ankles and tug, gently, until everyone is standing where he wants them. Troy will not fall to brute force, he says. It is almost a kindness to admit it out loud. The Greeks have spent years throwing themselves against walls like waves against rock, and the rock has only grown slick with blood. They have burned fields, raided villages, killed princes. They have watched heroes die, and still, the city stands. Odysseus' eyes flick toward the horizon. A tiny smile touches his mouth. Not warm, not cruel, just certain. We must give Troy what it wants, he continues, and use that wanting against it. Men mutter. They are tired. They want a clean ending, a last charge, a shout, a collapse. They want a story that fits inside the mouth of a bard. Odysseus offers them something different. A quiet knife, a wooden horse. At first, it sounds childish, like a toy left on a beach. A horse made of timber, a gift, a trick, something you would tell children to make them giggle. But then you imagine it in your mind's eye and it stops being funny. You picture the carpenters selecting trees, straight trunks, thick enough to bear weight. You picture the axe bites, the chips flying, the smell of fresh sap bleeding into the air. You picture men hauling logs over sand, the ropes cutting into their palms, their shoulders straining, their teeth clenched against the salt wind. You picture the framework rising, rib by rib, like the skeleton of some enormous beast being assembled in plain sight. I've always found it eerie that the Greeks build their greatest weapon openly, not hidden in shadows, not forged in secret. They construct it in daylight, while Troy watches from its walls, as if daring the city to misread them. Maybe that's the whole point. Humans are so eager to interpret. We hate leaving things unknown. We see a shape and we rush to name it. Gift, omen, surrender. We prefer a wrong meaning to no meaning at all. The horse grows. Its belly becomes hollow. That hollow is important. It is the space where violence will wait, patient, breathing quietly, knees drawn up, blades in hand. Odysseus chooses the men who will hide inside, not the loudest, not the ones who need glory like air. He picks the ones with controlled fear, the ones who can hold their breath when the urge is to scream. Men like Menelaus, hungry and hard. Men like Diomedes, steady as iron. Men like Neoptolemus, Achilles' son, young, sharp, carrying a borrowed shadow. Neoptolemus is the part that makes my skin prickle, because he arrives too late to meet his father in life. He inherits Achilles like an heirloom sword, beautiful, heavy, already stained. He steps into camp, and everyone looks at him as if he is a second chance, a replacement, a way to keep the story going. But you can't replace a person. You can only create another tragedy. Neoptolemus walks the shoreline at dusk and stares at the tomb mound where Achilles' ashes rest. The sea wind tugs at his hair. The salt dries on his lips. He presses his palm to the earth and whispers something, maybe anger, maybe longing. The mound does not answer. It never does. Yet the boy stays there a long time, as if waiting for the sand to warm beneath his hand with some sign of approval. When he finally turns away, the light has thinned, and his face looks older. The horse is completed. It towers over men. Its flanks are smooth, planed wood that catches the sun. Its head is lifted, as if sniffing victory. The whole thing is absurdly beautiful. That's what makes it dangerous. Ugly lies are easy to doubt. Beautiful lies slide down the throat like honey. They paint it. They carve details, eyes, mane, joints. They make it look like devotion, like art. Then, the Greeks do the second part of the trick. They leave. They burn their tents. They pack their ships. They push off into the sea and row away until their hulls are small shapes on the horizon. From Troy's walls, it must look like the world finally exhaled. The plain, for the first time in a decade, empties. Smoke rises from abandoned fires. The wind carries nothing but the sound of grass bending. Inside the city, people begin to believe. Belief is a soft animal. It curls up in your chest and purrs. It makes you reckless. The horse stands alone, massive, silent. One Greek remains, Sinon, a man trained to tremble convincingly. He is found by Trojan scouts, tied and bruised, his eyes wide with practiced terror. They drag him into the city. The streets of Troy are narrow and shadowed compared to the open plain. You can almost smell the change, less dust, more stone, more cooking fires. People lean out of windows. Children peer from behind pillars. Dogs bark, then quiet, sensing the tension. Sinon tells his story. He says the Greeks were desperate. He says Odysseus hated him. He says they meant to sacrifice him. He says he escaped. He says the horse is an offering to Athena to ensure safe passage home. He says if the Trojans harm it, Athena will curse them. He says if they bring it inside, Troy will be protected forever. It is, frankly, the kind of story that is too perfect. It contains everything a frightened city wants. Proof of enemy weakness, the pleasure of mercy, the thrill of divine favor. And the Trojans, they have been living with fear so long that they want a new emotion. Any new emotion, even if it is built on splinters. Some argue against it. Laocoon, a priest, stands before the horse and frowns, his brow knotted like rope. He says the words that echo through history. Beware Greeks bearing gifts. He takes a spear and drives it into the wood. The sound is a hollow thud. Inside, men freeze, knees tucked, fingers white on dagger hilts, breaths held so carefully it must feel like swallowing smoke. And then this is the part that feels like a nightmare someone would invent. To punish skepticism, two serpents rise from the sea. They glide over the sand, wet scales catching light, their bodies thick as a man's waist. They coil around Laocoon and his sons. The boys scream. Laocoon struggles. The serpents tighten. You can hear ribs crack. You can see mouths open, not in heroism, but in the animal shock of dying while everyone watches. When it is over, the bodies slump, twisted. The Trojans interpret the omen the way the gods intend, as punishment for doubting the horse. That's how manipulation works. It doesn't only push you forward, it punishes you for stepping back. So they decide. They bring the horse into Troy, and oh, the labor of it. Ropes are thrown over the wooden body. Men strain. Sand shifts under their feet. Wheels are rolled into place, groaning under weight. The horse moves an inch, then another. The city gates are opened wide, like jaws. The horse's hooves scrape stone. The sound echoes between buildings. It is like the city is hearing its own future being dragged across its teeth. Women throw flowers, priests chant. Children run alongside, hands reaching up to touch the smooth wood, giggling as if this is a festival float. It is heartbreaking, honestly. That innocence, stepping so close to a hidden blade. Night falls. The Trojans feast. They drink. They dance. They tell each other it is over. The torches burn low. The wine makes faces shiny. People collapse into sleep with mouths open, the way exhausted people do, trusting the darkness like a blanket. The horse stands in the center, dark now, a silhouette against starlight. Inside, the Greeks wait. You can imagine the sweat on their palms, the stiffness in their legs, the ache in their backs from crouching. You can imagine the slow burn of fear, not the screaming kind, but the kind that sits in the stomach like a stone. Odysseus listens to the city's sounds through the wood. Laughter fading, footsteps dwindling, a baby crying once, then being soothed, a dog whining, the last drunk voice slurring itself into silence, and then stillness. This is the moment I always linger on, because it is the moment when the world could still choose a different path if humans were better at waking up, but they are not. A signal comes. Maybe it is a torch flickering on the shore. Maybe it is a ship's oar creaking softly. However it happens, the Greeks know it is time. Odysseus pushes open a hidden panel. Cool night air spills into the horse's belly. It smells of smoke, wine, stone. One by one, men slip out. They land on the ground silently, knees bending to absorb impact. They move like shadows that have learned to wear armor. And Troy sleeps around them. That is the dark magic of it. A city asleep while death walks its streets. They make their way to the gates. A guard slumps against the wall, head lolled. His breathing is heavy, drunk. Neoptolemus hesitates for half a heartbeat. Then he does what the war has taught him to do. A quick cut, a warm spill. A life gone without even understanding it was threatened. The gates are opened. Far out on the sea, Greek ships have been waiting behind an island, oars held, men sweating in silence. Now they row back, swift, inevitable, like predators returning to a scent. The invasion begins. Troy wakes to screams, not heroic screams, not battle cries. The screams of people dragged from sleep into fire. Torches are thrown onto roofs. Dry beams catch. Flames climb quickly, licking like hungry tongues. Smoke fills courtyards. The night becomes orange and black, shifting, choking. In the chaos, you can't tell where the danger is. Every alley looks like an escape until it dead ends in a wall of heat. Every doorway looks like shelter until someone bursts through with a blade. The Greeks pour in. They split into groups. They have rehearsed this violence in their minds for years. Now their bodies act without needing thought. And in the center of it all, Neoptolemus moves as if the darkness recognizes him. He is young, but youth does not mean innocence. Not here, not now. Youth only means energy, a fresh reservoir for cruelty. He heads for the palace. Priam is old. He cannot run. He is the kind of age where standing up costs effort, where knees complain, where breath comes slow. He has already kissed the hands of his son's killer. He has already emptied himself of pride. Now he sits near the altar of Zeus, clutching it like a child clutches a parent's leg. Neoptolemus enters. The light from burning beams throws harsh stripes across his face. His eyes are bright. He looks like Achilles in the curve of his jaw and the set of his shoulders. It is as if the war has resurrected Achilles in a crueler form, one without the softening that grief can bring. Priam begs. It is hard to write the begging. It is hard to think about it without feeling that old, tight sadness. The king offers ransom. He offers gold. He offers his own life in exchange for mercy. His voice shakes. The altar stones are cold under his hands. The smell of smoke fills his lungs. His mouth tastes like ash. Neoptolemus does not stop. He drags Priam from the altar and kills him. The blood runs over sacred stone. The gods do not intervene. They rarely do, when intervention would require compassion. That is the kind of darkness that makes sleep stories strange. You are listening to horror, but the voice stays soft, because the softness is a way of saying, yes, this happened in the human heart. And the human heart, even when it is terrible, still beats quietly. Elsewhere, women are taken, children are thrown, men are cut down. The city that held for 10 years folds in one night like a tent in a storm. And above it all, the horse stands empty now, its belly hollow and useless. A monument to how easily faith can be turned into a weapon. If you feel your chest tighten while hearing this, let it loosen. Let the truth be heavy, then let it settle. Because the night is still moving, and we are going to follow it, slowly, toward its final hush. By the time the sky begins to pale, Troy is no longer a city. It is a wound. Flames have eaten roofs and ladders, beams and tapestries. Smoke has soaked into stone. The streets, which once carried wedding processions and market baskets and children's bare feet, now carry ash. The air tastes like burned cedar and human hair, that bittersweet smell that clings to the throat. If you have never smelled a city burning, it is not like a campfire. It is heavier. It has layers. Wood, oil, cloth, meat. It presses into the lungs and makes every breath feel like you are inhaling grief. The Greeks move through the ruins in pockets, their helmets smudged black, their eyes red-rimmed from smoke and sleeplessness. Their victory does not look like joy. It looks like work, like a long task finally finished, leaving the body hollow and shaky. Some men laugh. Yes, there are always men who laugh in disaster, because laughter is a way to keep from hearing your own soul. But most are quiet. They step over bodies the way you step over driftwood, trying not to think about what the driftwood once was. Odysseus walks with his sword still in hand, but his mind is already reaching forward, already calculating how to leave this place before it becomes a trap. He knows that victories have aftertastes. He knows that gods, like human rulers, sometimes punish those who succeed. I think about him pausing for a moment, at a crossroads, where smoke curls low and gray like fog. He stands there as if listening, not for enemies, for something else, for the subtle shift in the air that says, "You have done what you came to do, and now the bill is coming." Menelaus storms through the palace, searching for Helen. He finds her, eventually, and the stories can't agree on what happens next. Some say he raises his sword and cannot strike. Some say her beauty disarms him. Some say Aphrodite intervenes. Some say he is simply too tired to hate as fiercely as he once did. Helen stands amid ruin, and I always feel odd pity for her, even though she is the spark that lit this fire. Because sparks do not choose what they ignite. People do. Men made choices. Gods made choices. A woman's face became an excuse. She looks at Menelaus and sees years in his eyes, years of ships and corpses and rage. She says his name, perhaps softly. He lowers the sword. Outside, the surviving Trojans are rounded up. Andromache is taken, Hector's widow, once strong, now hollowed. She has already lost her husband, her father-in-law, her city. Soon she will lose her son, Astyanax, thrown from the walls so the child cannot grow into revenge. I'm going to say that slowly, because the slowness is how the mind survives it. A child, lifted, carried, and dropped. The body is small. The fall is long. The sound when it ends is not a sound you want inside you. It stays, though. It sits in the chest like a pebble you can never swallow. Hecuba, queen, watches her world unravel. Some tales say she goes mad, barking like a dog, transformed by grief. Whether that literal transformation is true doesn't matter. The feeling is true. There is a kind of grief that makes the human voice unrecognizable. Cassandra, cursed to speak truth and never be believed, is dragged from the temple where she clung to a statue. She screams. No one listens. No one ever listened. She knows what will happen next. That knowledge does not save her. It only adds an extra layer of pain. Foresight without power. Neoptolemus moves through this like a man in a dream. He does not look for treasure first. He looks for people. He looks for names that still have weight. It is as if he is trying to prove something to his dead father. See, I can be terrible too. See, I can take what I want. See, I can fill the shape you left. But the shape is too big. It always is. Priam's palace, once bright with polished stone and woven hangings, becomes a maze of shadows. Rooms that once held perfumes now smell like smoke. Courtyards that once echoed with music now echo with coughing. In corners, frightened servants press themselves against walls and make themselves small, as if smallness could turn them invisible. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. And then there is the way the gods watch, not from the sky like kindly parents, more like gamblers leaning over a table, eyes bright, waiting to see who wins and who loses and who bleeds. I always feel uneasy when I think of Olympus in this story, too clean, too far away, too entertained. When the sun finally rises, it reveals the full ugliness. Charred beams like black ribs, courtyards carpeted with broken pottery, smashed under running feet, blood dried dark on pale stone, smoke trailing from collapsed roofs like breath from a dying animal. The sea beyond the city is calm. That contrast is almost insulting. The waves keep arriving, withdrawing, arriving again, as if nothing happened on land. Gulls circle. The world goes on. And then, quietly, the Greeks begin to gather what they came for. Spoils, captives, stories, because stories are a kind of plunder too. They will take Troy into their mouths. They will chew it into songs. They will polish some parts and leave other parts raw. They will make heroes out of men who did terrible things. They will make monsters out of the defeated and forget their names. But even in the moment of triumph, the camp does not feel safe. You can sense it in the way men glance upward at a clear sky, expecting sudden thunder, in the way they mutter prayers before stepping onto a ship, in the way the sea, which brought them here, now looks like a wide, cold judge, because Troy's fall does not close the account. It opens another page. On the shore, Achilles' tomb mound still rises sand and earth piled like a sleeping animal's back. The wind keeps combing it. The surf keeps kissing the stones at its base. It is strange how calm that place is compared to the smoking city behind it. And yet, the Greeks do not dare ignore it. They speak of omens, of dreams, of the dead man's shade. Some say Achilles' spirit appears in the night, not as a gentle memory, but as a presence that presses down on the camp like humidity, a heaviness, a demand, a reminder that even a hero, once slain, can still have a kind of hunger. The word that circles is one people hate, appease, as if the greatest warrior of the Greeks needs a gift, even now. And so the darkness makes another turn. A girl is chosen, Polyxena, Priam's daughter, a princess whose hands, not long ago, might have been perfumed, might have held ribbons or lyres. Now her wrists are bound with rope that bites into skin. The rope is rough, and if you imagine it closely, you can almost feel the tiny splinters, the way they cling, the way they itch beneath the surface. She is led to Achilles' tomb. The path is short, but every step is its own universe. Sand shifting under bare feet, Smoke, haze, stinging eyes. A low murmur from soldiers who won't meet her gaze because looking at her too long would force them to admit what they're doing. Neoptolemus walks beside her. Of course it is him, the son inheriting the father's. Ghosts like a family debt. He carries a blade. The metal catches the morning light, bright and indifferent. His fingers are steady. His jaw is tight. If he feels anything pity, guilt, hesitation, he swallows it. That is what the war taught them. Swallow, swallow, swallow until your throat is raw and your heart is silent. Polyxena is not silent, not screaming. No, that would give the moment the drama it doesn't deserve. She is composed, and that composure is what hurts. She steps up onto the mound with dignity that makes the soldiers shift their weight uncomfortably. She lifts her chin. The wind tugs at her hair. She looks out at the sea as if memorizing its color, as if wanting to carry one last image into whatever darkness comes next. And then she offers her throat. It is such a human thing, to face the inevitable with ritual, to turn murder into ceremony so the killers can pretend it is sacred. Neoptolemus cuts. Blood darkens the sand. The sea keeps moving. I know, it's unbearable. But listen to the way the story moves. Slow and steady, like a lullaby. This is how myth works. It takes the worst things and lays them in your hands gently, so you can look without being shattered. Still, I always feel a quiet fury here, not the loud fury of Achilles, something colder, because Polyxena's death is not a battle. It is not even revenge. It is bureaucracy of grief, a transaction. And the Greeks, having paid it, hope the ocean will be kinder. Some are not. Ajax the Lesser drags Cassandra from Athena's temple. That detail matters. A sacred place. A violation inside a place that was meant to be safe. It's like spitting into your own well. And Athena, who can be as patient as stone and as violent as lightning, does not forget. That is the thing about gods in these tales. They remember. They remember what humans would like to bury. Soon, the ships begin to leave. The Greek camp dismantles itself. Tents collapse into poles and canvas. Fires are stamped out, leaving circles of gray ash. The sand is littered with small things. A broken cup, a lost needle, a scrap of cloth. The tiny debris of 10 years of waiting. Men board ships with their prizes and their prisoners. Oars dip into water. The hulls creak. Salt spray flicks onto cheeks like cold fingers. And the sea looks calm. But calm can be deceptive. A flat surface can hide currents that want to pull you under. Odysseus stands on his deck and watches Troy shrink into a line of smoke. Menelaus watches too. Agamemnon watches too. Each man carries a different weight in his chest, but all of them carry something. You cannot spend a decade feeding war and not carry the taste of it. As they row, some men begin to talk, quietly, about home, about olive trees, about goats, about wives' hands, about the smell of bread, about the particular way sunlight looks through leaves in their own village. The details get soft around the edges, like dreams. Then, the wind shifts. Clouds gather. Not dramatic at first, just a bruising along the horizon. The air cools. The waves begin to slap the sides of ships with more insistence, like a knock that is no longer polite. I always think of that moment as the gods clearing their throats. Storms rise. Ships scatter. Masts snap like bones. Sailcloth tears and flaps wildly. Men shout orders that vanish into roaring wind. Oars slip from wet hands. Salt water slams into faces, into mouths, into lungs. Some ships capsize. Men in armor sink quickly, dragged down by the weight that once protected them. The sea takes them without malice. It simply takes. It's almost gentle, in a way. The sea doesn't hate. It doesn't gloat. It just completes the cycle. Bodies return to water. Iron return to the dark. For a moment, imagine the silence beneath the waves, the muffled thunder above, the cold pressure, the strange calm down there, where shouting can't reach, where light fades into green, then into nothing. If your mind wants to tense at that image, let it soften, let it float, let it drift away, because this is not only a story of punishment, it is a story of how endings ripple. Troy falls. The Greeks leave. The gods remember. And somewhere in the middle, Achilles' name keeps echoing not only as a hero's name, but as a reminder that violence does not stop when the spear stops moving. It keeps going, like waves. Achilles is not here to see it, but his shadow is everywhere, in the rage that fueled the war, in the trick that ended it, in the boy who carried his bloodline into the palace like a torch, in the sacrifice on the shore, offered to a dead man's reputation, as if reputation were a mouth. And somewhere, in the smoke, in the early morning light, I imagine something that isn't in every version of the myth, but feels true to me. I imagine Patroclus's name being spoken once by a soldier who knew him, softly, like a private prayer. I imagine Achilles' mound by the sea catching the first pink of dawn. I imagine the wind brushing over it, and for a moment the world seems to sigh, because even in the darkest histories, there are small pauses, little pockets of quiet, where the soul can unclench. Later, long after the ships have left, the ruins of Troy will cool. Grass will creep over blackened stones. Birds will nest in cracked walls. Children of another age will play where princes once fell, unaware of the names beneath their feet. That is not redemption. It is simply time doing what it does, covering. If you are lying down right now, listening, let your body take that lesson. You do not have to carry the whole burning city in your chest. You can let it become distant, a glow on the horizon, a story told beside a fire. The candle is low, the room is dark, the air is warm near the hearth, and cool at the edges. And your mind can drift toward those edges, toward the gentle blur where details soften. When thoughts come sharp ones, sad ones, strange ones, let them pass like smoke. Watch them curl, thin, dissolve. And if, in the quiet, you think of Achilles, don't think of the spear, or the anger, or the heel. Think of the sea that held his mother's tears, the sea that washed blood from sand, the sea that keeps breathing, steady and endless, teaching the body how to breathe too, in and out, in and out. Let the war fade, let the names fade, let the last ember dim until it is only warmth. Good night.